Okay, well, good evening, everyone. We have an amazing program for you this evening entitled The Dinosaurs Among Us. And to put it bluntly, be prepared to be blown away and never think of birds or dinosaurs the same again. Our presenter is Kim Adelson, avid birder, board member for the Black Hills Audubon Society, which is in Olympia, as well as a board member of the Friends of Nisqually National Wildlife Refuge. Kim was a professor of psychology for almost 30 years, but fortunately for us, she then transitioned to evolutionary biology, which, as you'll soon see, has brought her path and ours together tonight to discuss the dinosaurs among us. Be prepared to be amazed. And with that, our special guest speaker, Kim Adelson. Kim, take it away.
Thank you. That was a very kind introduction. The pressure builds. Okay, let me share my screen and let me just move this over so I can see what's going on. Okay, well, as you heard, the title of this talk is The Dinosaurs Amongst Us. And my objective is to convince you all that birds not only evolved from dinosaurs, but in fact, they actually are living, breathing dinosaurs. So what I'm going to do is present the evidence for why, not just me, almost all paleontologists believe that, and then also trace how you go from a T-Rex to a canary. Okay, because we have actually now, because of new fossil deposits, new fossil beds in China mostly, we actually have a pretty complete fossil record of how it happened. Not a lot of big gaps, and very continuous change can be seen. So anyway, I just wanted to start off by saying that I really hate the phrase that birds evolved from dinosaurs, because I think it implies two things that are not true. The first is I think what it brings to my mind when I hear that is there were dinosaurs, and then at the very end of the age of dinosaurs, you got birds, that they came in late. And that's not true. Dinosaurs or birds coexisted with dinosaurs for more than 95 million years, which is about half the age of dinosaurs. So they're not late. They're not Johnny-come-latelys or, things at the very end of the age of dinosaurs. And secondly, to say that birds evolved from dinosaurs implies that they're different from them, and they're not different from them. And as Gary said, I mean, I think that I hope you not only realize after this talk how dinosaur-like birds are, but even more importantly to me, how very bird-like dinosaurs were, because I think people have a lot of misconceptions about what dinosaurs were like. So I'm going to go back and forth talking about dinosaurs and birds, but I want to start off by talking about, the first time you always have to do it this way with your clicker. So come on. Okay, that time it worked. All right. So what I want to talk about first is what makes something a bird. And my aim here is to show you how different birds are than any other living vertebrates. Okay, they really are a class unto themselves. So I've got 6 attributes. The first is wings. And I would say it's 97% true that birds are the only vertebrates with wings. There's one exception, and that is, of course, bats. So with the exception of bats, there are no other living vertebrates that have wings. The second of these traits is that birds have a hard, toothless beak. Again, I'd give this a 97% true because there's one exception again. And the exception to this is turtles. Turtles also have hard, toothless beaks, and they even have a little egg tooth like some birds do when they're first hatched. Okay, but except for turtles, no other living vertebrate has a hard, toothless beak. Also, I wanted to remind you that not all birds have fully hard, toothless beaks. There are some birds, like this turkey vulture, that their skin, their flesh, really goes most of the way through their snout, and they only have a beak at the end. Okay, so not all birds have completely hard beaks, and the reason that's important is there are a lot of dinosaurs that look a lot like this turkey vulture, where they have a partial beak at the very end. Also, though birds have toothless beaks, some birds and this is a bird, not an ant mandible. I always think it looks like an ant mandible. There are some birds that, though they're structurally nothing like teeth at all, functionally they have these projections coming off of their beak that serve as teeth. You probably wouldn't believe it if you didn't know this, but this is actually a tiny little hummingbird beak. It's a Colombian hummingbird, and you know that hummingbirds are feisty little guys who attack each other all the time and are willing to attack bigger birds. Well, teeth help if you're trying to pull out somebody else's feathers, and so some of them evolved these tooth-like projections. But anyway, again, I would give hard toothless beak a 97%. Third characteristic that distinguishes birds from other living vertebrates is hollow bones. Again, 97, 98% true. Let me show you kind of a classic long bone. You can use a human femur. You can see that these bones have very thick walls, and then they're filled with marrow. An eagle femur, on the other hand, has a much thinner wall. It doesn't have any marrow in it, and it's got these bony struts to give it strength. The reason I'm giving hollow bones a 97% is that there are no non-birds that have hollow bones, but there are some birds that don't have hollow bones. So penguins and kiwis and ostriches don't have hollow bones. But if you have a hollow bone, then you're definitely, and you're a vertebrate, then you're definitely a bird. Fourth characteristic, birds lay calciferous eggs. This one you can give a 99% to, depends on how persnickety you want to be. First off, there are a lot of animals, amphibians, that lay soft jelly-like eggs that have to be submerged in water because they have no way to keep themselves from drying out. So clearly, bird eggs are very different than amphibian eggs. Then you've got lizard and snake eggs. Here on the left is a white-cheeked tern's egg, and you all know what bird eggs look like, if for no other reason than we all have chicken eggs for breakfast all the time. And as you know, it's got two layers. It's got an inner membrane, and then it's got an outer shell made of calcium carbonate, which is very brittle. Okay, and that's why you can peck a hole in it like this bird is doing. On this side, we've got, this is a baby ball python. And so these are python eggs, and you can see that they're leathery, they're soft, they're not made of calcium carbonate. If you pick them up, they really do feel more like leather than anything else. So bird eggs are very, very different than lizard and snake eggs. The reason I gave it a 99% is this guy. Crocodilians, both alligators and crocodiles, have an egg that's not the same as a bird egg, but it does have an outermost shell of calcium carbonate. Crocodilians actually have a 3-layer egg, where the innermost layer is like a bird's. It's kind of a membrane. They have the leather that you see in lizard and snake eggs in the middle, and then the outer coat is calcium carbonate. So it's not the same as a bird egg. Birds are the only vertebrates that have that 2-layer calcium carbonate egg. Okay, so the first 4 are almost completely true, but not completely true. My last 2 traits that distinguish birds are 100% true. There are no exceptions to them. Okay. My favorite is this one. Birds have what I call the amazing 2-way lung. And they have by far the most efficient respiratory system of any vertebrate. And if you think about it, birds need to take in a lot of oxygen. They burn an incredible amount of energy when they fly. Flying is hard. It takes a lot of energy to do that. And they not only fly, as you know, some of them fly ungodly distances. Well, excuse me, I've got to let my cat out. I'll be right back. Or else you're going to hear her meow the rest of the talk. Anyway, bar-tailed godwits can fly 7,000 kilometers nonstop. Okay, that takes a lot of energy. And then some birds, like the griffon vulture, have been recorded at flying as high as 37,000 feet. Not a lot of oxygen up there and very cold. So you have to really have a great way of taking oxygen into your system. Let me show you what this lung looks like. Okay. What birds have is a system of sacs that are not lung tissue. There's no lung tissue in them, but that are attached to their lungs. So, I mean, think about it this way. When we breathe in, we take oxygen into our lungs, and when we breathe out, we expel carbon dioxide. So you're actually only taking in oxygen 50% of the time when you're breathing. Birds, on the other hand, when they breathe in, the air goes through their lungs and some of it goes into these sacs. So they take in oxygen when they inhale, but then when they exhale, the air that hasn't been used up yet goes from the sacs back through the lungs and they get another shot of oxygen. So they get a double dose. They get a shot both when they inhale and they exhale, and that's why they can have such fast metabolisms and they can fly the way they do. Only birds have anything like this. It is absolutely the best respiratory system in any animal. So yay for birds. And then the final characteristic that is absolutely 100% true, distinguishes birds from other living vertebrates, are feathers. Okay, if you see a vertebrate with feathers, it is a bird. No exceptions to that. I hope I have time to talk about these later. I may or may not. Birds have lots of different types of feathers. They have different purposes. They evolved at different times, but only birds have feathers. Okay. I should point out that birds have feathers, but they still have reptile scales too. Okay, this is a bald eagle foot, and you can actually see that they have two different types of scales. They've got these flat plate-like scales, and they also have these round little pebbly scales. Okay, so birds actually have two different types of scales, and it's not just on their feet and legs, though that's what you think of first. There are a number of birds, like this black vulture, that also have scales on their head and neck, head and or neck. Okay, so birds have feathers, they still retain some scales. Okay, so what I've tried to show is that if you go to 6 things you pick out 6 things that make a bird, we're basically 0 for 6 for any other living vertebrate. So birds are not closely related. They're not very similar to any other living vertebrate. Well, let's do the same exercise with dinosaurs. Wings. Lots and lots of dinosaurs had wings. Hard toothless beak. Very few dinosaurs had a completely toothless beak, but lots and lots of dinosaurs had a beak with only a couple of teeth left. You know, so maybe they had 6 teeth or 8 teeth, you know, rather than 30 or 40 teeth. So many, many dinosaurs have a hard beak and getting close to being toothless. Hollow bones. Lots and lots of dinosaurs had hollow bones. Calciferous eggs. Until about 6 or 8 months ago, that was considered a criterion to be a dinosaur. You could not be classified as a dinosaur if you did not have calciferous eggs. Now, a researcher claims that he found a very, 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 very early dinosaur, when dinosaurs first evolved, that did not have calciferous eggs. So I can say, except for the very earliest dinosaurs, if this guy turns out to be right, yes, dinosaurs all had calciferous eggs. Two-way lung. Lots of dinosaurs had two-way lungs. How can we tell? Because some of these air sacs are in the bones, and so you can find them in the fossil record. So you can see them. And feathers, the question nowadays is not, did any dinosaurs have feathers? The question is it many or most dinosaurs have feathers? So instead of 0 for 6, we're pretty much 6 for 6. Birds are clearly much more related to dinosaurs than they are to any living vertebrate. And a lot of these traits that we talked about are not just found in the dinosaurs that are in the line that evolved into birds. So for example, this is a model of a stegosaurus head. Stegosauruses have nothing whatsoever to do with bird evolution. You can see that they have a beak, and they don't have very many teeth either. So there's an example of that. And then, you know, I first got the dinosaur bug when I was a kid. I grew up in New York City, and my parents used to take me to the American Museum of Natural History all the time. And so I know that dinosaur hall well. Well, about 3 years ago, the American Museum of Natural History closed their dinosaur hall, which has one of the greatest dinosaur collections in the world, to redo it. And when it reopened, the first thing you see when you walk into the new hall is a feathered T-Rex. So Even the American Museum of Natural History now thinks that dinosaurs had feathers. And I mean, they're about as mainstream as you get. I mean, that's about as credible as you can find. And in fact, standing under this guy is a little baby T-Rex with big teeth and dowdy feathers. So yeah, they think so too. Okay. So again, when you look at the features that we think of as making birds birds, they share them with dinosaurs. They don't share them with anything else. So, I mean, I think that's pretty persuasive that birds are going to be closely related, if not evolved from, if not actually, dinosaurs. Okay, so there's that. Next point. Let's talk about what is a dinosaur. Because my experience has been, because I talk about dinosaurs all the time, that most people think that any reptile that lived, 100 million years ago was a dinosaur. It just means old reptiles. But that's not true. Dinosaurs were a single specific order of reptiles. A taxonomic order is something on the size of primates or penguins or hawks and eagles. So, I mean, they're really pretty similar. I mean, they're not incredibly similar to each other, but it's a very specific type of reptile that has certain features. It is not any old reptile. Dinosaurs first evolved about 240 million years ago, which is in the early to mid-Triassic. The non-avian ones died out at the end of the Cretaceous, which was 65 million years ago. We'll talk about that more. You do the math and you realize that dinosaurs, and I mean, when I say dinosaurs, I mean classic dinosaurs, the ones you're thinking of, they lived 175 million years. They were really successful creatures. They lived all over the planet, on every continent, in every habitat. There's no doubt, the way we're the dominant species now, they were the dominant order then. And, they died out because there was a cataclysmic event. It's not that they got out competed. It's not that they were slow and stupid and something better came along. It was an asteroid that crashed into the earth and really messed things up for a while. And they all died out. So dinosaurs were very successful creatures, as are their descendants, the birds. Okay. Well, how can you, what are some of these traits that characterize the order of dinosaurs? Most of them are internal things that, unless you're an anatomy nerd like I am, you don't care about. Things like how many wrist bones they have and what order do certain bones fuse and what's the ratio of this bone to that bone. Yuck, you don't care about that. Here's the easiest way, if you see a diorama in a museum, to tell whether or not something's a dinosaur, okay? And it's this. Here we've got an Apatosaurus on the left. And if you look at it, look at how its legs go straight down under its body. This alligator, on the other hand, has the kind of leg that every other reptile that's ever lived has had. And that's a splayed leg, where the leg comes out horizontally from the body and then does a 90-degree turn. Okay, so these have these splayed legs. Think of a gecko, as opposed to legs straight under their body. Here's another example of that. Mammals also have legs straight down. And here's a Gigantoraptor. Yes, and it was heavily feathered, just like this one is. And you can see its legs also go straight down. So that's what you're looking for. That's the most visible, obvious trait that makes a reptile a dinosaur, the only ones that have it. Okay, well, now let's really get to bird evolution. But I'm kind of a linear thinker and maybe a little compulsive, so I have to kind of start at the beginning. And for me, the beginning, when I talk about bird evolution, is to start with the earliest reptile. So this is Hylonomus. He is arguably the first reptile. He's certainly the oldest reptile that we know about. Okay, maybe there's another one or two that are older, but he's the oldest one we know about. Hylonomus was about 8 inches long, an insectivore. You can tell that by his teeth. And he evolved about 315 million years ago, which was 75 million years before dinosaurs. What makes him so remarkable, or I should say her, so remarkable, is that Hylonomus was the first amniot. And when I say that, what I mean is they have amniotic eggs. And what I mean when I say that is this was the first creature that wasn't an amphibian, that didn't have to lay its eggs in water because its eggs were watertight. So it could lay its eggs on the ground. Now, I don't know which is the chicken and which is the egg. I can't really say what caused what. But 315 million years ago, when Hylonomus emerged, the world was drying out. You know, climate changes periodically. And we were going from a very wet world to a much drier world. And so all of a sudden, there were lots of places that didn't have puddles and didn't have ponds and didn't have streams. There was a whole world out there that was just there for the taking if you weren't tied to staying near a pond. And so these first reptiles were incredibly successful. They had no competition. They just walked onto the land and kept going and traveled far and wide. And so very, very quickly in the way evolutionary biologists measure time, Hylonomus was one of the stem reptiles, the earliest reptiles. In just 5 to 10 million years, they differentiated into 3 different superorders of reptiles. Okay, and again, the reason they differentiated so quickly is because they had this huge unoccupied habitat to exploit. So I'm going to start by talking about archosaurs, because archosaurs are where dinosaurs fit in. So here are archosaurs. So I said archosaurs evolved pretty much right after Hylonomus, 310 million years ago. And they then, in turn, over time, evolved into turtles, and turtles were the oldest. And then dinosaurs and crocodilians came next. And then pterosaurs, those flying reptiles. And then plesiosaurs. Plesiosaurs are marine reptiles that lived in the water that look a lot like the Loch Ness Monster. Okay, if you can envision that. Think of Nessie. Anyway, there's a couple of things to really pick up from this slide. The first is, again, that dinosaurs evolved birds evolved 160 million years ago. Dinosaurs died out 65 million years ago. So for almost 100 million years, birds coexisted with dinosaurs. Secondly, since birds evolved from dinosaurs, and if you look at archosaurs, you've got turtles and crocodiles, what don't we have here? We don't have snakes and lizards. I say this because if you're as old as I am, you grew up on old black and white science fiction movies where people would take a monitor lizard and do a close-up on him, and he was supposed to be a dinosaur. So a lot of people my age kind of think that dinosaurs were just giant lizards. What I'm trying to tell you is they're not particularly closely related to lizards. They're much more like turtles and crocodiles than they were like lizards. So get that monitor lizard out of your mind from all those Raquel Welch in a fur bikini movies, because that's not the right image to have. Okay. All right, that's archosaurs. Since I mentioned lizards, lizards didn't come from archosaurs, they came from lepidosaurs. And if you look at lepidosaurs, just like archosaurs turned into dinosaurs and then dinosaurs eventually gave rise to birds, lepidosaurs gave rise to lizards who gave rise to snakes. Okay, there's that evolutionary chain. And yes, snakes are newer than birds. I say that because that often surprises people. We always think, oh, warm-blooded must be newer than cold-blooded, but no, not necessarily true. Okay. And that then, oh, pictures of that. Why is this here? Hold on, I'm out of order. Okay. Okay, just some illustrations of what I was saying. Here's a hadrosaur, and you can again see the legs tucked under the body. This is a bearded lizard. You can see it's, oh, I know what I'm supposed to be saying. There are 3 big differences. There are 3 ways to distinguish dinosaurs from lizards. Dinosaurs were not lizards. So the first difference is the leg position, tucked under the body or splayed. You can see that here. The second is the kind of scales they have. Lizards and snakes have scales. This is, what is this? I think this was another boa constrictor skin. When you look at a lizard or a snake scales, most of them are flat and they overlap. They get shed in one piece. We've all seen snake skins on the ground. And developmentally, they come from the upper layers of the skin, of the dermis. Dinosaurs, on the other hand, this is some mummified dinosaur skin that was found. don't have scales, they have scutes. Scutes do not overlap, they fall out one at a time, and they come from much deeper in the dermis. They develop much deeper in the dermis than lizard scales do. So that's a difference between dinosaurs and lizards. By the way, this creature, if you do a reconstruction of him, looks like this. He was one of the ankylosaurus type dinosaurs, and you can see he has these pretty massive scutes, which more than anything are like a turtle shell. And he also has the little pebbly skin that we were looking at before. Alligators with their big scutes, and they've also got pebbly skin, and our black vulture with its pebbly skin. So birds actually don't have scales, they have scutes, but that's being compulsive, nobody knows that. And then the third characteristic, which just absolutely proves that lizards were not related to dinosaurs, is that dinosaurs were normal. Like all vertebrates, they have, or with one exception, all vertebrates, they have one penis. Lizards have two. And they've had to from the very get-go. You don't go back and forth this way. I mean, that means it's a different evolutionary line. Okay, so again, big point here. Dinosaurs were not lizards, and hence birds are not closely related to lizards. Okay, they're more closely related to turtles and crocodiles. That leaves us with the third of the superorders, and this is really a digression, but I like to do it, so I'm going to do it. Okay. Synapses, early synapses look like this. This is actually Dimetrodon, who's older than any dinosaur, came first. Synapses are the kind of reptiles that eventually gave rise to mammals. Okay, this is our line here. So yeah, he's your ancestor way, 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 way back. An interesting thing about the synapsids is there's growing evidence. Oh, and look, they have splayed legs. It's the only dinosaurs were the only reptiles that ever didn't have splayed legs. There's growing evidence that from the very get-go, the lizards that, the reptiles that gave rise to mammals were nocturnal. The two best pieces of data that would support that is one, the structure and size of their eye, which is consistent with nocturnal animals. And two, if you can take a skull and you can make a cast of the brain and you can see what parts of the brain are big. And for synapsids, it's the olfactory lobe. They hunted by smell. Again, that's consistent with nocturnal animals. If you did the same thing with a bird skull, you'd find it had very big optic lobes and very small olfactory lobes. So anyway, I just like to do this because, you know, where do we fit into all this? So mammals arose from synapsids, a group of reptiles as old as the archosaurs. They evolved at the beginning of the Triassic, so they're older than birds, about as old as dinos. This was my big point. They coexisted with dinosaurs for 150 million years. And I say this because, again, people always tell me that they think dinosaurs disappeared because mammals came along and outcompeted them. No, okay, mammals did not outcompete dinosaurs. In fact, because mammals are actually a little bit older than dinosaurs, and dinosaurs took a while to really get going. If you look at mammals, very, very early mammals, before dinosaurs really got going, they were larger in size, they were more numerous, and they were more diverse in terms of their lifestyle and body shape. When dinosaurs came along, almost all the mammals died out. The only mammals that managed to survive in the age of dinosaurs were basically sneaky little buggers like rats and shrews and mice that kept out of dinosaurs' way. They kept out of dinosaurs' way by being nocturnal, by living in burrows underground, or by being high in the treetops where most dinosaurs didn't go. So no, the fact that dinosaurs disappeared had nothing whatsoever to do with mammals. Rather, mammals began to flourish once the dinosaurs weren't around anymore. So that's my point there. Okay, back to how do you go from dinosaurs to birds? One good place to start is to tell you that you can take dinosaurs and you can divide them in half, and one half led to birds and the other half did not. And I know, because this is what I would think, that if I tell you that there are two main types of dinosaurs, you can divide them in half, you probably think, oh, well, one half is these large two-legged carnivores like T-Rex, and then you've got four-legged herbivores like Stegosaurus. Very logical, but wrong, okay? That is not how you divide up dinosaurs. Oh, it makes sense that you should. Rather, you divide up dinosaurs by what their pelvis looks like. So there was one group of dinosaurs that are called saurischians or lizard-hipped because of the shape of their pelvis is very much like a lizard's pelvis. And so you can see T-Rex here, and you can see Apatosaurus here, both a two-legged carnivore and a four-legged herbivore. The other half were ornithischians, which means bird-hipped. And you can see a two-legged, that's actually a vegetarian, but he's a two-legged vegetarian and a four-legged vegetarian. So it's nothing to do with diet. It has to do with pelvis shape. And just to show you here what the two different hips look like. Now, again, logically, if I said to you, where did birds come from? The lizard-hipped dinosaurs or the bird-hipped dinosaurs? You'd say, well, of course, the bird-hipped dinosaurs, except that's wrong too. Birds evolved from the lizard-hipped dinosaurs, and their pelvis changed quite late. It flipped around, but this is where it starts. Okay, so now we know it's the suborder called saurischians. Well, which dinosaurs within the saurischians? The answer are theropods. Theropods, or theropodia, were a family of dinosaurs. Okay, a family of dinosaurs. Now, once you get down to the level of family, you're really talking about animals that are very similar to each other. I mean, think about canids, right? All things in the dog family, or felids, all the different cats in the cat family, or ursids, all the different types of bears in the bear family. I mean, they're all very similar to each other. So theropods are all really structurally very, very similar to each other. Theropods are were one of the first families of dinosaurs to show up. They were a very ancient family of dinosaurs. They lived throughout the entire length of the age of dinosaurs. They were also the most successful dinosaurs and the most numerous dinosaurs. We know more, we have identified, paleontologists have identified more than 1,200 different species of theropods. Given that there are only 5,000 mammals all over the planet now, you can get a sense of how diverse and how successful theropods were. And that's more than any other dinosaur family. They ranged in size from 3 inches in length to about 50 feet in length. Most of them were carnivorous, but not all of them. And even from the get-go, they shared many, many features of birds. Okay, this is where they come from. Now, I didn't tell you how big this guy was, but looking at him, you probably think, oh my God, this is one of these huge dinosaurs. And God knows there were huge theropods. The littlest one here is T-Rex, in fact. It's the littlest one. And I think that's the problem. I mean, the reason a lot of people have trouble imagining that birds evolved from dinosaurs is because when they think of a dinosaur, and if they think of a theropod, if they know they're supposed to think of theropods, they think of T-Rex. And it's hard to go from T-Rex to a canary. But what most people don't appreciate is theropods were a very diverse family, and not all of them looked like T-Rex. Some of them look like Gigantoraptor, and some of them look really a lot like birds. Okay, a lot like birds. These are not birds, these are dinosaurs. There's a bird because he's a theropod too. But there were a lot of theropods that just, because they weren't found as early as the giant theropods, nobody thinks about them. We're all stuck with T-Rex or Velociraptor in our head. And so theropods. By the way, the American Museum of Natural History isn't the only museum that has feathered dinosaurs. So does the Austrian National Museum, and they have this nifty sign on the wall saying, why do we feed dinosaurs in the winter? So they clearly believe that birds are dinosaurs. And again, I just want to remind you that pterosaurs were not dinosaurs. Birds did not evolve from pterosaurs. Okay, they're archosaurs, but they're not dinosaurs. They were very successful too. They lived about as long as dinosaurs. They share one feature with birds, and that's the toothless beak. They also have wings, so they're very, very different. And they too, at least some of the time, were feathered. We now know. One thing that shows is that feathers evolved multiple times. They evolved multiple times within dinosaurs, and they even evolved in 9 non-dinosaur archosaurs. So there we go. Okay, some other ways that birds are similar to theropods. First off, they're warm-blooded. And yes, theropods were warm-blooded. There are lots of different ways we know this. One thing is that two-way lung, because theropods had two-way lungs. You don't have that if you're not warm-blooded. You would never evolve it. You wouldn't need it. But this is my favorite piece of evidence, and I just had to pick and choose because there's a lot of evidence. If you look at warm-blooded animals like lions and antelope, what you find is there's about a 10-to-1 prey-to-predator ratio, okay? It takes 10 antelope to feed one lion. If you look at cold-blooded reptiles, it takes one cold-blooded reptile to feed another cold-blooded reptile. Cold-blooded animals have much slower metabolisms. They don't need to eat as much. Whenever you look at dinosaur remains, what you find is a 10-to-1 ratio of prey to predators, suggesting that they need to eat a real lot and suggesting that they therefore were warm-blooded. I could go on, but that, to me, that's my favorite piece of evidence. We know that they were very active. Again, they had that two-way lung. They were using it for something. This is cool, egg colors. You're all birders, so you know that bird eggs come in a limited range of colors. They're white or all cream colored. They may be blue-green like a robin's egg. They may have rusty or brownish speckles, but they're not purple, they're not yellow, they're not bright green, they're not sky blue. I mean, you know, there's really a limited range of colors. Every single color egg that birds have, we found dinosaurs with the same color eggs. And there is no dinosaur with an egg that's a color different than any bird has. Okay, there's a complete overlap in their egg colors. Theropods had expanded visual and memory lobes in the brain, just like birds do. They have a reduced number of toes, 3 toes, just like birds do. But I think what's really kicky is some really new stuff that's come out on how we can now guess that they're behaviorally, or hypothesize that they're behaviorally very similar to birds. So for example, not all birds, but many birds are highly social. You find them in large flocks. Dinosaurs too. We know that because, for example, if you find footprints in the mud, you can see that 150 different dinosaurs were walking next to each other because they're all different sizes. I mean, there's no other explanation for that. Or sometimes you find fossil beds where, you know, there's 75 of the same dinosaur all next to each other, you know, like a volcano exploded or something, and they all died at once, but they were all there together. So we know that, again, not all necessarily, but many different dinosaurs were social. Another example of a behavioral similarity is that birds have a very particular posture they adopt when they brood, okay, when they're sitting on their eggs or keeping their hatchlings warm. Here's a really new finding. This is a dinosaur. Here's its arms or wings, and there's its eggs. It's got the exact same posture, huddled over its eggs as a bird does. And my last similarity that I can show you are sleeping position. All across the class of birds, you can find birds that sleep with their head tucked under their wing. Okay, I mean, not in just one group of birds, but all through birds. This is a very, very common posture. They tuck their head under their wing. So did some dinosaurs. This is another pretty new finding. And here's the actual fossil. Here's the reconstruction of it. And so, you know, they were sleeping like birds too. So again, dinosaurs were, it's not just that birds came from dinosaurs. Dinosaurs were already quite bird-like, more bird-like than I'm sure you imagined is the case. Now, this is a disastrous slide, and I don't expect you to remember much of it. You can almost look at the colors, and that's all I care about. Here's the traits that take you from a classic dinosaur to a bird. It's the top line with brown are traits, feathers, legs, underbody, and bipedal that you find all across dinosaurs, not just the ones, not just theropods, not just the ones that are going to, you know, that are going to lead to birds. The second two lines, hollow bones, wishbone, three-fingered hand, bird pelvis, flight, and pygostyle, I'll explain some of those terms in a minute. Theropods have all these, okay? Not all theropods have all of them, but you can find all of these in the theropods. It's only the very bottom line, clawless wings, keeled sternum, and completely toothless beak, that characterize modern birds. Out of all the traits you need to get, only the bottom line is birds only. And if you go back and you look at early birds, birds that lived during the age of dinosaurs, they don't have any of these. So there were a lot of birds that, animals that we call birds, that really just totally overlap with what the traits that theropods have. Just to go over some of these terms, I don't want to spend a long time on it, but birds have wishbones. Wishbones, you know this from turkeys, are a fused clavicle. Here are clavicles, and that's the notch in the middle of your neck. Our clavicles don't touch each other. Birds have fused clavicles. We think that, I mean, we're pretty certain that the reason this evolved is because it takes a lot of force to fly. And you put a lot of pressure on your clavicles when you fly and you're trying to support your weight. So when they fuse like this, they become structurally stronger. And so that's where that comes from. A pygostyle, here's a rooster, diagram of a rooster. You know, there are a lot of birds that look like they have really long tails, but they're all feathers, right? All they have is a little tiny stump of a tail. You know, I mean, that's bone and muscle and flesh. Everything else is feathers. That's called a pygostyle. And they started off with dinosaurs having long tails, but little by little by little by little by little, those tails shrank till all you have is a pygostyle. That's good for weight reduction. If you want to fly, it's nice not to have a lot of weight. And then lastly, a keeled sternum. This is again a chicken skeleton. And you know this from eating white meat chicken. If you look at the breast, it's got this really funky shaped sternum because, again, flight muscles are really big and thick and they need something to attach to. In contrast, a dog has a totally flat sternum, doesn't stick out at all, doesn't have flight muscles, doesn't need it. Okay, so again, the big point I'm trying to make is that theropod dinosaurs and birds just shared most of the traits that we associate with birds. Okay. All right. Want to talk a little bit more about the path from dinosaurs to birds. This is an early bird. But the first thing, I guess, one thing I really want to say is that the skies were very crowded, even without birds, because you had flying dinosaurs. There were many, 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 many species of small flying dinosaurs. So they were in the sky. Pterosaurs were in the sky. Huge flying insects were in the sky. And then birds were in the sky. So the sky was a very busy place. But basically, and I don't mean to sound Lamarckian when I say this, it's just the easiest way to say it. The way you go from why birds changed to be looking like they look today versus the way their ancestors looked is because they were adapting to be able to fly better. And so what they did is they took structures that already exist and modified them, or they became modified in such a way to make them better flyers. Well, one thing you want to do if you want to fly well is you want to be lighter, right? It's hard to fly. You don't want to lift a lot of weight. So their bones got even smaller and thinner than dinosaur bones. As we just talked about, their bony tail was reduced to a stump to save weight. They lost their teeth. Teeth are very heavy, and fully replaced them by a horny beak. And they got smaller. Okay. Someone estimated, I don't know how he did it, I don't know if it's true, but some scientist estimated that if a 6 foot tall average weight human male wanted to fly, he would need a wingspan of 44 feet to be able to do so. And if you think how heavy those wings would be, there's no way we could fly. We're just too heavy. And so you need to get lighter if you're going to fly. Besides getting lighter, it helped to end up with arms and chests that were modified. In general, as birds evolved, and as you move from classic dinosaurs to birds, you get stronger arms, you get stronger shoulders. Again, you got to fly. You get the wishbone and the sternum we talked about, and the arms became longer and stronger than the legs. I mean, think about your own body. Your legs are stronger and longer than your arms. That's kind of the basal body plan. But in birds, it's reversed. Birds' wings are stronger and longer than their legs. For the most part, there are exceptions, but for the most part. Okay. All right. I'm just going to run through a few things and then really quickly, and then get to the stuff I want to talk about at the end of the class, because I'm always take too long. Anyway, just wanted to talk about, last change, feathers improved. Some types of feathers, flight feathers, are better than others, and so feathers improved. That helped them fly. I did want to talk about feathers because that's such an important characteristic of birds. This is a dinosaur, not a bird here. And all dinosaur lines had feathers. Even dinosaurs like, that were never going to fly, were never going to give rise to birds, had feathers. So for example, there are some Triceratopsians. That's a big, heavy thing like a rhino. It's not flying. And we now know that some of them were feathered. Given that, and I don't have time to talk about this a lot, but given that, what that proves is that feathers did not evolve for flight. They got modified and used for flight. But creatures that didn't fly, lots of them have feathers. So they probably evolved for either warmth or sexual display, or to help the animal brood, something like that, but not for flight. They were adapted and later on became for flight. They're also, birds are very colorful and some are even iridescent. So were dinosaurs. They're their cousins. Why shouldn't they be the same? So anyway, we've got a Triceratopsian with feathers to show you. Here's a hadrosaur with feathers to show you. This particular hadrosaur was the size of a rail and basically lived just like a rail and was feathered. This is a dinosaur that I don't need to talk to you about, except to tell you that nowadays they have developed techniques that let you know what colors dinosaurs were. You can do biochemical analyses on the remains, and you can also do microhistological views of the bone, and you can tell from the shape of the pores what the chromatophores looked like, and so what color they were. So here's a dinosaur with its right colors to show you that this particular dinosaur was jet black, but it had iridescent shoulders and head. And so dinosaurs could be very, very colorful. They certainly were heavily feathered. People who study this sort of thing divide feathers into 8 different types. We used to think that dinosaurs had 7 of the 8 types, with number 7, which is true asymmetrical flight feathers, being restricted to birds. They've now found dinosaurs with true asymmetrical flight feathers. So dinosaurs had every single type of feather that birds have. I also wanted to briefly talk about wings. Because I told you that, the only other vertebrates that have wings are either bats, which are still living, or pterosaurs, but their wings are very, very different. So a bat wing, which you probably never looked closely at, the way a bat wing works is there's a leathery membrane that's supported by all the bat's fingers. Okay, I mean, it stretches between their fingers, their thumb is free, and then attaches to their ankle. This has nothing whatsoever to do with a bird wing. Pterosaurs, on the other hand, are more similar to bats than they are to birds. They have a very long pinky. Their pinky is gigantic, and all their other fingers are free. And again, you've got a leathery membrane that goes along the pinky and then ties to the ankle. And you all know what bird wings look like. They're mostly feathered. They're not supported at the rear at all. They have an alula, which is basically the thumb. You know about that. I'm not going to talk about that. I'm not even going to talk about flight. I did want to talk about the beak a little bit. Beaks are really useful for birds and basically help them make up for their lack of hands and fingers. They pick things up with them. They use them to do all sorts of things. Again, while I don't know of any dinosaurs that had literally no teeth, there are lots of dinosaurs that have a beak and very few teeth. Okay, very few teeth. They're on their way to developing fully toothless beaks, but they never got there. So here's a Triceratops with its little beak. Here's a hadrosaur with a really weird beak. that almost looks like it's got teeth, but they're not teeth. They're like the hummingbird projections. And this is a pretty new finding, 2019. This is an Apatosaurus, and it looks like it has all of its teeth, and that's fine. It's got all of its teeth. But I don't know if you can see right here. You see how the teeth change color? The reason the teeth change color is it had a beak that went to here. And so these teeth aren't worn, and the bottoms of the teeth are. So again, no matter where you look in dinosaurs, you're going to find beaks. So again, very, very similar to birds. I'm going to pass these guys up. I'm going to skip that too. So I have time to talk about birds in the age of dinosaurs. And I'm really just going to talk about the first couple of birds because people always want to know. So the first true bird was called Aornis Zweig. At least he's the oldest one we know about. He lived 160 million years ago. He, about the size of a pheasant, could not fly, didn't have feathers that would support flight. He is the oldest bird we know, discovered in about 2013, if memory serves me. The oldest bird that most people know about is Archaeopteryx. And until very recently, we thought this was the oldest bird. I can't exaggerate. I couldn't possibly exaggerate if I tried the importance to the field of evolutionary biology of Archaeopteryx. The reason this discovery was so important is Archaeopteryx was discovered about 3 or 4 years after Darwin first published his theory of evolution on the origin of species. And it was taken as incredible evidence for Darwin's theory of evolution, because here you've got a creature that is clearly kind of like a dinosaur and kind of like a bird. It's got feathers, and it's got a long tail, and it's got teeth, and it's got claws. And so, I mean, here was the kind of intermediary creature that Darwin hypothesized, and they found it. And so I think the theory of evolution, I mean, I don't know this, but I really believe the theory of evolution may not have ever taken hold like it did if Archaeopteryx hadn't been found. It was considered the best evidence at the time. We now know this is what Archaeopteryx looked like. This is the correct coloration again, colored like a magpie, so black and white. What can I tell you about Archaeopteryx? Well, it's not a direct ancestor of modern birds. It's got some features that we know meant it was an evolutionary dead end. A very poor flyer. The way its shoulders are constructed tells us that it had lift on the downstroke, but not the upstroke of its wings. And so it probably flew a lot like an American goldfinch, you know, which kind of goes up and down like a roller coaster. That's probably how it flew. It's about the size, was about the size of a raven. And so that is, he's actually the second oldest bird we know, and a really a dead end, but important historically because of its effect on the theory of evolution. I've got a whole second part of the talk all about these guys and some other birds too, but the most common bird that lived during the age of dinosaurs were enantiorniths, which is a family of birds. We know of more than 80 different species, mostly forest dwelling, not all. These are true birds. Everybody who studies this agrees these guys are true birds, though you would find that they have some characteristics that modern birds don't. For example, they still had a few teeth in their jaw, and they had little claws, it's not shown in this drawing, on their wings. And they usually had funky tails like this, really long funky tails with 2 long tail feathers. But I don't have time to talk about them because I've got some other stuff I need to talk about. That's part 2 of the talk. Anyway, birds existed with dinosaurs. And unfortunately, most of the birds that were alive during the age of dinosaurs died out when the dinosaurs did. Very few birds survived that asteroid that hit the Earth. Let me talk about that. Why did dinosaurs die out? I keep telling you it's not that they weren't successful or fast or good hunters or anything like that. Well, what happened was an asteroid 4 miles in diameter going 40,000 kilometers per hour hit the Earth. It caused the Gulf of Mexico to form. Okay, that big hole we call the Gulf of Mexico didn't used to be there. When it hit with a force approximately 2 million times greater than our strongest nuclear weapon. So imagine 2 million nuclear bombs going off. It created a heat wave and a force blast that went 900 miles out, and it instantly killed anything in a 900-mile diameter. When it hit, it caused this big crater to form, now the Gulf of Mexico. And when it did that, all this burning rock flew into the air, which then settled. And when it settled, it caused forest fires and prairie fires all around the world. Every single forest on the planet burned down. Not much, especially nothing that lived in the forest, survived that. And in fact, the usual shorthand when we talk about this is that anything bigger than a cat died off. Any land animal bigger than a cat died off. So there went all the classic dinosaurs. And in fact, most of the birds, because a lot of the birds were living in forests. There were a lot of forests back then. There were also mile-high tsunamis and earthquakes. So the amazing thing isn't that the dinosaurs died off, it's that anything managed to survive. So most of the birds died off too. Very, very, very few birds made it. What else do I want to say? And very few mammals made it. The mammals that made it, and in fact, the birds that made it, had certain characteristics. One is there were seabirds or sea mammals because the oceans weren't as badly affected. Two, they were animals that lived underground or in caves because that sheltered them from the worst of the damage. And the third was if you ate either underground insects or seeds, because seeds can survive even when the forest burns down. And so those are the ones that survived. Okay, last topic and I'm done, I promise. I've been focusing up till now on how bird-like dinosaurs were. I don't want you to forget that there were also a lot of birds that were very dinosaur-like. And so one of the first things that got me interested in birds and dinosaurs was reading a book called The Birds Who Ate Horses. Now, horses were smaller back then than they are now, but it's still an amazing image. There were birds that ate horses, and they're called terror birds. Terror birds evolved right after that cataclysm. When the dinosaurs were gone, you needed new big predators, and these were the new big predators. They lived all over the world, though they really flourished in South America. They grew up to 10 feet tall. There were lots and lots of species of them, and they were the apex predator. Because, as I'll show you in a second, South America was an island. Okay, there was no Central America. The oceans were too high. There was no Central America, so South America was an island. All the dinosaurs died out, all the mammals died out, only a few birds survived, and they evolved into these terror birds. Okay, and so these were the apex, these were the lions and the tigers of South America at the time. You see this thing here? Those are human teeth. These guys used to eat people. How do we know that? Because you look at their remains and you can find human bones. These are human finger bones inside their bellies. This particular set of bones are from a fossil 115,000 years old. So some of them lived not that long ago. I mean, they lived a long time, you know, all the way from 65 million years to really pretty recently, but they were tough enough to eat people. Here's what I was showing you. When the oceans are high, South America is separated from North America. And if there are no mammals, and if there are no dinosaurs, you can have a bird get really nasty and really tough and really scary and become the apex predator. But what happened over time is that the seas went down again, and now you have Central America. And when Central America reappeared, the terror birds died out. And the reason the terror birds died out is because they were really big and tough and scary and nasty, but not compared to saber-toothed cats or dire wolves who came down from North America and ate them all up. And you can see that very clearly. There are fossils where you've got both of them fighting. On the right's a terror bird. On the left is, just to show you, there's still some pretty scary looking birds around. I cannot believe I am blanking. A shoebill stork. Can't believe I'm blanking on that. A shoebill stork. So we've still got some pretty amazing birds. I like that picture. He looks very angry there, very scary. But he's not this. He's a big scary bird. He kills his prey by decapitating them with that bill. But he's not the scariest bird there is. The scariest bird there is has a claw that looks like this. I've actually seen them. And this is the world's most dangerous bird, and it's the northern cassowary, which live in Australia and have definitely been known to kill human adults. You keep away from them. They're the most scary, but we've got other birds that to me look still a lot like scary dinosaurs, like this ground hornbill. Anyway, in closing, what I want to say is that we like to say, we in a very conceited way say, we live in the age of mammals. But I'd like to remind you that while there are more than 10,000 species of birds, there are only 5,000 species of mammals. And while there are between 200 and 400 billion individual birds on the planet, there are only 130 billion mammals. Birds outnumber mammals. Birds range in size from 1 ounce to more than 300 pounds. Birds live in every habitat on the planet. They live in the Antarctic, they live in the desert, they live in marshes, they live on the ocean, they live in jungles, they live in prairies. They live everywhere. And so what I'd like to leave you with is the thought that dinosaurs are still amongst us. They're still whoppingly successful. It's just that they're a little smaller than you're used to thinking about. And that's it. Till next time, I'm done. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Kim. That was really cool.
You can tell I like dinosaurs and early birds.
How big were those terror birds?
The biggest ones were 10 feet tall. The smallest
Wow.
ones were about 5 feet tall.
And you said that they developed over 100,000 years ago, and
No, they first came. The first fossils of terror birds are from about 64 million years ago, 63 million years ago. Right after, I mean, they like I said, you know, again, when they're empty niches, you know, when you've got a blank canvas, things evolve quickly. So they evolved once the dinosaurs were gone and the mammals were gone. They just took off. They lived till most species died out about 2 million years ago, but some lived to 50,000 years ago, which is definitely coexisting with humans.
Impressive.
So the terror birds in South America were sort of like the birds in New Zealand,
In
with the
Australia,
absence of mammals. I was thinking
yeah,
New Zealand with the absence of
I used to
mammals.
live in New Zealand, so I'm very familiar. Yeah,
Oh,
when you don't have mammals, again, you know, what you get is birds that take over the niches. That's why in New Zealand, for example, they used to have moa, which looks sort of like ostriches, who took the place of cows and bison and things like that. They were the large herbivores. Yeah, I mean, empty niches tend to get filled, and it's the birds who did it if there's nobody else to do it.
The cassowaries, how
Yes.
big do they run now? I mean, that's a living bird.
Yeah, that's a bit, maybe 6 or 7 feet tall. I came uncomfortably close to one once, and I'm 5'1", and it was quite a bit bigger than I was. I mean, it, you know, I mean, it was, it was not just a few inches taller than me. So,
They look closest to the dinosaurs.
yeah, they're nasty things.
Kim, you said that there was a bird that weighed 300 pounds. What
Ostrich,
bird is that?
ostrich, a
Okay.
large male ostrich weighs
Thank
300
you.
pounds. And they can be close to 8 feet tall. Get a real big one. I saw those in Africa. They weren't scary. Completely unrelated, but it's just, you know how people think that ostriches hide their head in the sand? They don't, but I know why people think they do, having seen them a lot in Africa. And that is when they put their heads down. I saw them in Namibia. When they put their heads down, there's a bush that grows in the veldt there. And from a distance, they look just like the bush. If you don't see their head sticking up, they look just like the bush. I mean, you can come right up to them and until you're 50 yards away, you don't know there's an ostrich there, or 50 ostriches there.
So it doesn't look like we have any more questions, but fabulous, fabulous presentation, Kim. And
Thank you.
way. And I'll definitely be getting back in touch with you. We'd like to see part 2 and 3 at some point as well.
I hope so. Like I said, I love talking about this stuff. So thank you for having me.
Absolutely, and thank you.